I'll be careful. I promise. I won't let him get hurt, and I won't let him hurt anyone else.
Minutes later.
That's what happens when you're a bad guy. Too late.
Well, it looks like little Oliver has a lot of his father's anger in him, leaving Mark and Debbie with a little killer on their hands. We get the return of some of my favorite characters and a whole lot of blood at the end. There's a lot to talk about in this breakdown and review of Season 3, Episode 3 of Invincible. Spoilers ahead. We open this episode in an unexpected way with a silent opener from the perspective from what some would call the villains. Now we see a bank robbery is underway as the two villains are from Season 1 and used to work for Machine Head. Now those two villains are Mag Maniac and Tether Tyrant as they make their presence felt and start to take the money from the safe. Tether Tyrant notices a little kid with their father and they're afraid as he tries to calm them down, but in comes Bulletproof, who's here to save the day. Now after a brief scuffle, we see that the both villains manage to escape. Now we cut to seeing their day-to-day lives, and this is where we see that they're in a relationship, and we get the very interesting POV of what could lead a villain down a path of crime. We see that they're financially struggling and want to put their days of crime behind them and try to make a living earnestly. From here, we see them both getting a job at the diner near them, and for a little bit, they seem to be on the right path of making ends meet. Now, as some time goes by, we see that their rent has increased, which forces them to go back to looking for additional income for a second job. After getting into an argument with their boss, they both lose their jobs at the diner. Now tempted to go back into the life of crime, but they resist the temptation for now. We see that their living situation has changed drastically as they even get evicted and are forced to live on the streets as they decide it's time to go back to being criminals. We see them seamlessly getting away with the robbery, but in comes our hero Invincible, but in their eyes, in comes the person who's stopping them from trying to survive. Now Invincible takes them both on in a fight, but Tether Tyrant manages to wrap him up as Mag Maniac is about to use his lava abilities on Invincible, but in comes Oliver to stop him. Now Mark gets distracted while talking to his brother and gets thrown off to the side as Tether Tyrant now has Oliver in his hands, but he stops from hurting him because he notices that he's just a kid. Now eventually Invincible knocks both of the villains out as their story comes to an end as we see them in prison later in the episode. Man, I seriously love when this show steps out of the box and gives us a different perspective from characters that don't really have much impact on the main overall story. Being a criminal, or in the comic book world a villain, isn't the right thing to do, but you can understand why someone in their position would do and make the decisions that they did. The two characters we follow weren't necessarily bad people because we didn't see them hurt anyone or try to kill anyone, but they did find themselves in a bad situation and ultimately made the bad decision to rob a bank. Again, I love how the show has these type of openings and how it plays into the greater story and how it plays into the themes of what's going on in the particular episode, which the big theme in this episode is all about perspective. Now we see that Mark is upset that Oliver didn't listen to him or his mother about getting involved with using his powers. Oliver tries to make his case, but Mark takes him home. Now back home, we see Oliver get sent to his room while Mark and Debbie discuss wanting Oliver to have a normal life, but they ultimately agree that it's time for Mark to train him. As Mark promises that he won't allow anything bad to happen to his little brother, and once he made that promise, to me that definitely sets up something terrible is going to happen to Oliver, and we see something terrible happen later in this episode. Now we cut to seeing Eve in college as she runs into Amber and they catch up over some coffee. Now Eve catches Amber up on everything happening with Mark, including them now dating, which Amber already knew about because William already told her. Now Amber is completely cool with them dating, as she's even beginning to start to date after the breakup with Mark, as it appears that their relationship is going to be in a good place. Now we catch up with the ex-Guardians who return to their old headquarters before joining the Guardians, and they're now calling this home. Now we see Rex and Ray share their memories about growing up as kids and being forced into becoming superheroes and missing out on being normal. To me, this whole interaction of them connecting and what happened with Ray and Rex last season definitely makes me think that the show is setting them up to be more than just friends. Now we cut to the prison where we see Tether Tyrant and Mag Maniac as they walk past Multi Paul. Now for the first time since season 1, we get the return of one of my favorite characters, and that's the return of Titan. As we see the Titans being pressed by one of the members of the Order to get one of his best assassins, Multi Paul, out of prison, but we see that Titan refuses. As Isodope lets Titan know that even Machine Head played by the rules of the Order and suggests that he break Paul out of prison, or else he'll be replaced and his family will be in danger. Again, another example of a character who in the world of Invincible is quote-unquote a villain, but we obviously know his story with his family, and he even said in this episode that he's cleaned up the streets, but again, he's going to be going down this path of doing villainous things, but he's doing it to protect himself and his family. Now we cut to seeing Mark training Oliver how to properly fly first, and later he'll teach him how to fight as he's got a surprise for him. Now that surprise is Mark taking him to Art, and he has a super suit prepared for him. Now the O symbol on his chest stands for Kid Omni-Man to Mark's disapproval. As Mark pulls Oliver to the side to talk about what the symbol will mean to others who see it, and that they'll be thinking about the horrible things that their father did, as Oliver says that he understands. Now Oliver isn't the only hero to get a new suit in this episode, as Art heard about what happened between Mark and Cecil, and he gives Mark the fresh new look, which is his blue and black suit. Now they hear the news on the radio about the attack at the prison as Mark and Oliver head out on their first hero mission together. Now we cut to seeing Curse and Furnace attacking the prison as Invincible sets the rules for the unnamed hero Oliver for now, as he immediately doesn't listen to Invincible and tries to save people. Now we see Oliver gets hit by one of the blasts, knocking him to the ground as Invincible jumps into Big Brother mode and takes the villains out with ease. Now switching gears and talking about this episode's subplots, we see Debbie and Paul on another date and things are going well, which leads Debbie to feeling comfortable enough to share the truth about her past with Nolan and her kids. Now we see Paul feels insignificant compared to the previous relationship with Nolan, but Debbie reassures him that he's more than enough. Now it's safe to assume that we're going to see Paul and Debbie continue to grow their relationship over this season, but if I'm being honest with you all, I don't think he's going to make it out of this season. At the very least, he's going to get very badly injured and he's going to probably run away from this relationship because of that, or he's going to probably get killed. Now focusing on the other subplot in this episode, we cut to seeing Eve, who's trying to move back with her parents as she gives them an ultimatum. She wants to have a relationship with her parents, but they have to accept her for who she is with her powers and all. Now her mom quickly accepts her terms, and even though he was hesitant, we see her father accepts her terms as well as she's officially moving back in. I honestly hate Eve's parents, but I can understand where she's coming from. She wants to have that sense of family. She wants to have a relationship with them, but I just hated the way they treated her in the previous seasons and even that flashback special episode that we saw. But hey, I'm Team Eve, and I hope that everything works out for her. Now, as Oliver and Mark head home, they find their mom kissing Paul, and while it was definitely awkward in the moment, the conversation shifts when they see themselves on the news. Now, Mark learns that Paul knows who he really is, as Mark in his new suit hears the new name that the public's given him, and it's Invincible. As we see Mark and Eve playing catch up with how each other's day went, we see that Mark feels like he's just having too much on his plate, and he believes that he's bound to letting everyone down again. Now, Eve being the great person that she is, she reminds him that the people that he relies on, he can rely on them if he needs them. As we watch them kiss, we see that there's a drone in the distance that's spying on them, and initially I thought this was Cecil, but we later find out who this drone belongs to. Now we cut to a military base where we get the return of my favorite twins, and it's the Mauler Twins, who plan to launch missiles to destroy the world as they're anticipating the Guardians to try to stop them. Now as the Guardians ultimately arrive, we see the twins are disappointed to see only half the team has appeared as they begin to fight. Now the Mauler Twins always has something up their sleeve as they built this new weapon that could shut down your nervous system as they take down Samson first, followed by Shape Smith and Kate, leaving Immortal and Darkwing left. Now Darkwing is quickly taken out as Immortal is the last one left, but he's shortly taken down just like the others. Now we see Mark sees all this on the news, and even though he doesn't work for Cecil anymore, he reluctantly agrees with his mother that he should still help people, even the Guardians who was against him, and how he handled the Cecil situation. Now just as the twins are prepared to destroy the world, in comes Invincible. Meanwhile, Oliver sees Marks on the TV at the missile base, and before Debbie tells him not to go, he flies off to help his older brother. Now Invincible gets hit by the weapon, but manages to slowly get up, and just as they're about to hit him with the weapon again, in comes Oliver, who stops them. Now Mark is slowly regaining his strength as Oliver is somewhat handling his own until he gets his face slammed to the ground as him and Mark regroup, and while they're talking off to the side during all this, we see the twins set off the missiles. Now Mark tells Oliver to go home as he goes after the missiles, but Oliver doesn't listen and he takes on the twins by himself. We see Oliver channels his anger and breaks one of the twins' jaw. Now the other twin grabs and slams Oliver into the ground harder than before and briefly knocking him out. Now while that's happening, we see Mark chases down the missile and he manages to punch it mid-air as it explodes. Meanwhile, speaking of punching, we see Oliver gets up and he punches one of the twins so hard that he flies through their body, killing him, breaking the promise that he made to Mark and Debbie. As he tells the remaining twin,
"That's what happens when you're a bad guy."
As he walks up to the twin with the broken jaw, he hits him with an uppercut from hell, killing him as well. Now Now the Guardians finally come to and they see what Oliver has done as Cecil arrives as well. Now little Oliver claims it was all an accident, which it clearly wasn't, and to me, he definitely has that Viltrumite killer instinct in him and doesn't know how to control it. Now Mark gets back and he immediately chokes Cecil because of what he told him last time by staying away from his family, but he quickly sees what Oliver has done. Now the whole "I didn't mean to" Mark act isn't working right now, as Oliver wonders why Mark is so mad at him after defeating the bad guys. Yeah, our boy Mark's got a little Damon Wayne on his hands who's got this bloodthirst as he says to Mark,
We won! I beat the bad guys!
You killed them!
I didn't mean to, but now they won't hurt anyone else.
A little killer Oliver is confused to why his brother is mad at him for saving his life as he decides to fly off and Mark chases him. As we see, Oliver, like everything else, is quick at learning things as he now has super speed and breaks a sound barrier, but Mark eventually catches up to him. Now in Oliver's defense, he brings up Mark killing Angstrom and again saying that killing the twins was an accident. Now Oliver can't seem to understand what he did wrong and he makes his case that he killed them so that they can never hurt anyone again. Yeah, Mark, I think it's time to put down little Ollie. Like seriously, like joking aside, what would you all do if you was in Mark's position? Like, do you send little Ollie to Cecil to learn how to use his powers to control his anger? Or will it come to time that we're going to see Mark having to have to literally put his little brother down? And by the time that happens, he's going to probably be the big brother because we see how quickly he grows. But again, I just think it's only going to get worse from here. I say that because if he's making excuses at this young of an age now and he has this thought process now, as they say, Pandora's box is going to be impossible to close after this incident. Now going back to what happened to the Mauler twins, I'm such a big fan of those characters and I just hope that they made like a backup clone of themselves because they're such great characters. As we end this episode, Mark tells Eve about what happened as she tells him that he's just a kid and he doesn't know how to control his powers yet. Listen, Eve, I love you and all, but nah, this kid knew exactly what he was doing, but we see Mark tells her that he's afraid that Oliver reminds him of their dad. Now we see Mark and Debbie confronting Oliver about his remarks about life not being precious. Now little killer Oliver, Damian Wayne, claims that he understands and he'll never do it again, which again, I don't believe him. Now our final moments show the family hugging each other as Mark notices that drone again from earlier spying on them and he catches it as it explodes in his hand. As we end the episode with Mark not knowing where this drone came from. Which leads us into our post-credit scene, which shows us a mysterious person who's been watching and recording Mark over the last few days, as this person says,
"Such a happy family."
Yeah, that's 1000% Angstrom, but the question is this the same one that Mark thought that he killed last season, or did he have a backup version of himself hidden in the multiverse as a backup plan if he died? Now, the only issue with that theory is season 2 showed that all of the multiverse versions of himself died in that explosion that Mark was blamed for, which created him as his arch nemesis. So it will be very interesting to see that Angstrom is back and to learn if it is the version that Mark thought he killed, or if it's just some type of other multiverse version of the character who knows what Mark did. Nonetheless, back-to-back great episodes where we see both perspectives of what it makes to be a hero and a villain. Seeing those villains at the start of the episode and seeing what led them to becoming villains was a matter of just them wanting to survive. We see that Titan isn't wanting to get into the Order's business and breaking Paul out of prison, but he has to do that because he wants to protect his family. Looking at the line that Mark never wants to cross again after Angstrom, but hearing now how Oliver sees villains and if he permanently ends their lives, you don't have to worry about them hurting anyone you love, including your family. This whole Oliver storyline is going to be very interesting. I'm really excited to see how it plays out this season, especially with the idea of how quickly Oliver grows up. It's going to be a point in this season when he's going to be taller, he's going to be faster than Mark, and the question remains, will we see Mark having to have to maybe kill his younger brother? This will end my recap and breakdown of episode 3 of season 3 of Invincible. Now, at the time of this recording, I've reviewed episode 1 and 2, so if you haven't already, make sure to check out those videos, and I'll be back every single week breaking down this new season of Invincible. If you all enjoyed my breakdown of this episode, make sure to hit that like button, but also share this video, but more importantly, share your thoughts about Oliver, share your thoughts about the Mauler twins, share your thoughts about Angstrom and everything that we had in this episode, as well as the first 3 episodes. Which of the 3 was your favorite? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Don't forget, you all are awesome, stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next video.